Today we're going to be discussing the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time, which is from Luke, chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. And it's about the parable of the dishonest steward. So this is a pretty long parable, so I thought it would probably be better if we just break it down into sections and read it as we go and then comment as we go. So with that, we're going to start by reading verses 1 through 8. Then he also said to his disciples, "A rich man had a steward who was reported to him for squandering his property. He summoned him and said, 'What is this that I hear about you? Prepare a full account of your stewardship, because you can no longer be my steward.' The steward said to himself, 'What shall I do, now that my master is taking the position of steward away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do. When I am removed from the stewardship, they may welcome me into their homes.' He called in his master's debtors one by one. To the first he said, 'How much do you owe the master?' He replied, 100 measures of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Sit down and quickly write one for 50. Then to another he said, 'How much do you owe?' He replied, 100 cores of wheat. He said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Write one for 80. And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently." So this parable has to be understood, and the dishonest steward has to be understood in light of the customs of the day of an agent acting for their masters. And also the common practice that these agents put usury into all of these transactions. So much like the tax collectors of the day, who were Jews employed by the Romans, these stewards also added to what was owed, and they kept the difference for themselves. And so this additional burden inflicted on the debtors or the tax payers made these people absolutely despised by their own folks. So this is one of the major reasons, it's not in this parable, but this is one of the major reasons that Jesus was so criticized by the Jewish leaders for ministering to these tax collectors and as well as to the prostitutes. So the dishonesty, and this came as kind of, when I was studying this, kind of came as a surprise to me. The dishonesty of the steward consists in the squandering of his master's money, not in the graft. And I had always read this prior, that it was really the dishonesty was in the graft itself. But no, it's actually, the commentary that I've read is that it's in the squandering of the master's property. Much akin to what happened in the parable preceding this, which is the prodigal son, where he goes, takes the father's money and squanders it. So the master actually, and this also I found interesting, the master actually commends the steward because he forgoes, when he writes these notes and rewrites them, he forgoes his usury commission and has the debtors write the new notes for exactly what they owe the master. So why would he do this? Well, he knows he's going to be out of work, and he knows that he's going to have to be able to deal with these people again and look for them for help in the future. And so he does this so that he will ingratiate himself to them when he no longer has a job. So the next section is verses 8 and 9. You really need to read 8 and kind of to lead into 9. It said, "And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently. For the children of this world are more prudent in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. I tell you, make friends for yourself with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And this dishonest wealth is kind of an interesting expression, but first of all, the actions of the children of this world are represented in the parable by the actions of the dishonest steward. So that's how they tie together. But dishonest wealth expresses the pursuing of wealth as an end in itself. So the pursuit without God as being your first focus has the tendency to lead one to dishonesty. And then the other thing that I found interesting is make friends for yourself with dishonest wealth. That's kind of an interesting saying. And basically what that means is make friends with wealth by helping the poor. Because if you help the poor, when wealth fails you, okay, you will still be able to look forward to the eternal dwellings. In this case, that means heaven. So you can see how important that is, that we have the right relationship with wealth and that we don't go to that place where it means so much to us that we actually would do something dishonest, either to get it or to keep it. So verses 10 and 12. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. If therefore you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, will you be trustworthy with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? And so here we're talking about the difference between being having fidelity to your responsibilities, taking seriously your responsibilities, and basically, why would anybody trust you with greater responsibilities if you're not really good with your menial responsibilities, which we all have on a day-to-day basis. And the other thing is this contrast between dishonest wealth, which would be worldly wealth, and true wealth, which is gaining the kingdom of God. All right? So, and then they finalize with verse 13, and you're going to probably recognize this from Matthew's in his 6th chapter where he's giving the Sermon on the Mount. No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So this third conclusion is really a general statement about the incompatibility of serving God and also being a slave to riches. And to be dependent on mammon, and mammon is an Aramaic word, that's the language they spoke, all right, that means wealth. And it's really being dependent on mammon or wealth is really opposed to all of Jesus' teachings. So he counseled that the complete dependence on the Father is one of the real characteristics of the Christian faithful and the Christian disciple. So interestingly, here in the gospel, mammon is being used as a god in itself. So once wealth becomes a god to you, all right, you definitely have drifted off on the wrong track. And to conclude, I think St. Thomas Aquinas wrote something that really brings us all home and focuses us. Aquinas wrote that there are 4 things we fill our hearts with when we do not fill them with God: pleasure, honor, power, and wealth. So if our hearts are not filled with God, then we try to fill our hearts, that hole in our hearts that God has put there for Himself alone. But if we push Him out, we try to fill them with one or all of those 4 things. God bless you.